restoring trust in your working relationships. I want to talk to you about some keys to do that really quickly. I've been talking to a number of different companies where I've seen this theme and this pattern where there has been trust that has been breached. Expectations have not been fulfilled. Frustration or hurt or offense between the owner and the management or employees. And it's consistent throughout the work industry, business industry. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, it happens. It happens in relationships. And so I want to give you some ways to be able to overcome that. But first I want to share a story of what happened. So I was meeting with a CEO not too long ago, and he was telling me about how this conflict he's been feeling with one of his staff members. It feels like every time he talks to them, all right, when he presents an idea or when he tries to talk to him about things that are going wrong, he's there sharing his ideas, or he's sharing what he's trying to do, and he feels this resistance. He feels like he's just beating his head against a wall. He feels like there's just constantly friction. He's like, I don't even know what to do. I've gone to this person and I've talked to them and said, hey, what's going on? Did I do something? Or, hey, it feels like you were still at odds because of something that happened. And he's tried to talk to him, but nothing happened. And so I sat down with this individual, this person, the staff member, and I said, hey, let's talk about some things that are going on. How do you feel about the owner? How do you feel about this situation? What have you been experiencing? What's your frustrations? And so he shared his frustrations and things that we could work out. But I said, it seems like there's this disconnect between you and the owner. Can you tell me about it? And this particular individual said, no, you can't help me. I said, what do you mean? He goes, what he did, you can't fix him. You can't change that person. You know, that's very typical in situations where there's a lack of trust, where there's a hurt and offense. What happens in an offense with the individuals, it puts a filter system inside your eyes, and it's hard to see that person with truth because we're hurt. It could be from the owner to the employee or the employee to the owner. It doesn't matter what it is, or any relationship. When we get offended or hurt, we end up having this filter system. We have this lenses on that everything we see with them is with the jaded perspective. We can't see truth really, whether you realize it or not. And it's hard to actually be open and hear what the person is saying. And so I sat and talked to this person. I said, listen, if you're not willing to talk through or to be able to work through your hurt or your lack of trust, if you don't believe that something can change, then there's no point in continuing this working relationship, because where there's a breach of trust, there comes a division. There's two different visions. There's a disconnect, and that will seep through everything you do. It will come out in conversations. It will come out in your team meetings, and it would destroy the team. And so this individual ended up not wanting to work through it. But another story happened where the same type of situation, there's a disconnected trust. And I talked to both individuals, and they said, you know what? Yeah, we're willing to sit down and talk about it. But here's the problem that happens when you approach a situation like that. Both parties tend to be hurt or frustrated or feel like they've been let down or disappointed. And it's hard to even approach that type of conversation. I was talking to an owner recently. He's like, I don't even know if I want to have that conversation with that person. The reason why is because he's been hurt. He's like, what's the point? Why even try? Because this person's not going to change. So I encouraged him to do a couple things, and this is what I want to tell you, how I feel like it's some keys to rebuild trust inside a relationship. First and foremost, you have to stop and be able to get your heart right with that person and with God. If you go into that conversation defensive and you go into that conversation hurt, it's going to be very hard to hear that person. So the first step is be going to God and say, God, I need to feel your pleasure for that person. I feel hurt, and I need to release that hurt to you. I need to give this hurt and pain to you, and I need to feel what you feel towards them. I need to see them how you see them. What that does is you're exchanging your hurt and offense, giving it to God, and allowing God to release to you what He's feeling towards that person. You start to feel His pleasure. You start to feel His thoughts of how He sees them, how He views them, that they're a good father, they're a good son, or they're faithful in what they do, and you start to see characteristics of how God views them. And what that does is start to change your perspective, because all you can see right now is just the frustration, the lack of execution, the lack of follow through, the things that they said and did. But as you do that, you begin to say, God, I choose to forgive them. So the first thing is exchanging your hurt and giving it to God, asking God to give you his perspective of them. And the third thing is then forgiving them, choosing to forgive them. Because if you cannot go into the conversation like that, then it's going to be very hard to hear and receive as a leader anything that they say. It's going to be hard to hear any words they say because you're going to be defensive, you're going to be hurt, you got a wall up, and you're protecting yourself. So if you take that approach, it's going to open your heart to be able to actually hear what that hurt is inside of them. Not that they're right or they're wrong, but you're actually able to hear what's going on, that you can be able to then listen to them and validate what they're experiencing. So I encourage you to stop and to actually take a few minutes to do that before you step into that position. But then as you get into that meeting, a huge component of communication is learning how to hear what a person's saying, validating what they're saying, repeat back to them what they're communicating, and then taking any ownership that you can of what they're experiencing. So it might be something like, "Hey, when you did this, you really hurt me because you let me down. You didn't follow through what you said you're going to do." So you repeat back to them what they said. "Listen, I think this is what you're saying. Are you telling me that when I didn't do this, you felt let down? You felt like I didn't follow through with what I said, that I wasn't fulfilling the word that I promised you, and you really were hurt and betrayed?" "Yeah, that's true." "Okay, listen, man, I'm sorry that you felt that way. I'm sorry that I made you feel like I didn't follow through with what I said. Can you forgive me for making you feel that way?" You might not have done that, but either way, you're communicating. You might not have done that intentionally. You might not actually have done any of that, but you're taking ownership of how you made that person feeling by what you communicated or what they experienced. Then you go and say, "Listen, this is what actually happened. Let me show you. Here, 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 and here. It was never my intention to do that." And you begin to walk them through. You add to the story. You begin to walk them through. But the first and most important thing is just validating and letting them know that you heard them and that you're taking ownership for things that you did do. I'm not saying taking ownership for things you didn't do, but what that does is it starts to break down the defensive walls, and it starts to let them feel like they're being heard, and that you begin to bring restoration and restitution between you and that relationship. There are some times where people just won't communicate. They're not willing to open up, and I understand that. But if you can rebuild trust, it's really important for you to do that within your team, because if not, it's going to be a constant friction, division. The first step, again, is going before God, getting your heart right, for choosing to forgive them, and going with an open heart to that conversation, and then communicating to them what you're hearing them say and validating what they're experiencing, and then beginning to add to the story, add to what you experience as well. If you do those things, I've seen it happen over and over, where the walls begin to break down and you're able to have a mutual conversation and be able to restore things. One last point that I would recommend is actually getting a third party involved. What I mean by that is having somebody else sit down with you between the two parties and let them be a mediator to help you make sure you guys are understanding each other. Because so often in conversations, we're hearing what they're saying and we're ready to rebuttal, or we're thinking of defenses, or even we're justifying in our mind, like, "I didn't do that," and we respond that way, and it just shuts everything down. So I'd encourage you, get somebody in the midst of the conversation to help you guys navigate it. They might not say anything, but just having somebody helps bring a safe environment for both of you to be able to communicate and rebuild the trust.